Who is Mark Robinson? The role of the lieutenant governor varies by state, but in North Carolina, the lieutenant governor has specific duties and responsibilities, combining legislative, executive, and ceremonial roles. Here's an overview of the key functions. Presides over the North Carolina Senate, the lieutenant governor serves as the president of the North Carolina Senate, but only votes in the event of a tie. This position allows the lieutenant governor to have influence over legislative proceedings and maintain a direct link to lawmaking. Member of various boards and commissions. The lieutenant governor is automatically a member of several important boards, giving them significant influence over policy areas. North Carolina State Board of Education. As a member of this board, the lieutenant governor helps shape policies related to K to 12 public education, including curriculum decisions, teacher standards, and school funding. North Carolina Board of Community Colleges, they also serve on this board overseeing policies related to the state's community college system. North Carolina Capital Planning Commission involves decisions about state property and capital projects. North Carolina Council of State, the lieutenant governor is part of this executive advisory body, which includes other statewide elected officials such as the governor, attorney general, and secretary of state. The council advises the governor and plays a role in decisions about state land, property, and financial matters. Executive role. Although the lieutenant governor doesn't have the full executive powers of the governor, they do act as the second highest executive official in the state. Their key responsibilities include AMDASO succeeding the governor. If the governor dies, resigns, or becomes incapacitated, the lieutenant governor steps in to assume the office of governor. Acting governor. When the governor is out of state or temporarily unable to perform their duties, the lieutenant governor acts as governor. Advocacy and initiatives. The lieutenant governor often leads initiatives or task forces on specific issues. For example, Mark Robinson created the FACTS task force to investigate political biases in public schools, using his office to advocate for policies important to his platform. Ceremonial role. The lieutenant governor represents the state at various ceremonial events, such as attending official functions, delivering speeches, and promoting state initiatives on behalf of the governor or the state government. Spokesperson for key issues. Lieutenant governors often use their position to advocate for issues they prioritize, such as education, healthcare, economic policy, or veterans affairs. While they cannot directly pass laws or execute executive orders like the governor, they can exert influence over public policy by working with legislators and other state officials. Limitations of the role. Limited legislative power. Outside of breaking tie votes in the Senate, the lieutenant governor does not have a direct vote on legislation or the power to introduce bills. No independent executive authority. The lieutenant governor can't issue executive orders or enact policies unilaterally. Their power is largely shaped by their ability to influence the governor and other state officials. In summary, the role of the North Carolina Lieutenant Governor is a blend of legislative leadership, executive backup, and public advocacy. The office holds influence primarily through its oversight of education, involvement in legislative processes, and public representation of key issues. Who is Mark Robinson? Mark Robinson's early childhood and upbringing were marked by significant challenges, which he often highlights as part of his American dream story. Here are key aspects of his early life: family background. Born in Greensboro, North Carolina, Mark Robinson was born in Greensboro in 1968, the ninth of 10 children in a working class family. Poverty. Robinson grew up in deep poverty, which he frequently references in his speeches. He shares stories of the financial hardships his family faced, including struggling to make ends meet. This background shapes much of his political rhetoric on individual responsibility and the importance of overcoming adversity. Father's death. His father, who Robinson describes as an abusive alcoholic, died when Robinson was 12 years old. His death left Robinson's mother to raise the large family on her own, adding to their financial struggles. Mother's influence. Robinson often credits his mother as the most important influence in his life. After the death of his father, his mother worked hard to provide for the family. Robinson frequently praises her for her resilience and the values she instilled in him, including faith, hard work, and personal responsibility. Mark Robinson, the current Lieutenant Governor of North Carolina and a candidate for the 2024 governor's race, does not have a traditional background in education or higher academia. His educational background is not often highlighted in his public profile, but here is what is known. High school. Robinson grew up in Greensboro, North Carolina, where he attended local public schools, including Grimsley High School. Military experience. After high school, he served in the United States Army Reserves. While this isn't formal academic education, his military service has been a significant part of his personal and professional development. No college degree. Robinson has spoken about his experiences with higher education, but he has not completed a college degree. He has shared in interviews that he attended college but was unable to finish due to financial and personal reasons, including family responsibilities. Robinson's lack of formal higher education has been a point of discussion, but he frames it as part of his story of perseverance, resilience, and relatability to average citizens. His rise to prominence came from his speeches and advocacy for conservative causes rather than through academic or political institutions. After leaving the military, Robinson worked in various jobs, including factory work and as a furniture manufacturer, before eventually rising to political prominence. He had no formal political experience before his viral speech in 2018 defending gun rights, which catapulted him into the public eye. He used his experiences of hardship, family values, and patriotism to fuel his rise in conservative politics, framing his life story as an example of overcoming adversity in America. Faith and religious beliefs. Robinson's Christian faith was shaped by his upbringing and remains a central theme in his life and political career. He often refers to his faith as the guiding force that helped him through the challenges of his childhood and adulthood. His views on issues such as abortion, LGBTQ plus rights, and traditional family roles are deeply connected to his religious beliefs. Conclusion. Mark Robinson's early life was marked by poverty, the loss of his father, and the strength of his mother. These experiences shaped his worldview and his eventual rise in politics. He frequently uses his personal story to connect with voters, emphasizing themes of personal responsibility, resilience, and faith as the keys to overcoming hardship. Mark Robinson is the Lieutenant Governor of North Carolina, serving as the first African American to hold this office since his election in 2020. A conservative Republican, Robinson gained national attention with a viral speech he made in 2018 at a Greensboro City Council meeting defending gun rights. That speech propelled him into the political spotlight, leading to his campaign for lieutenant governor. Since becoming the Lieutenant Governor of North Carolina in 2021, Mark Robinson has not had direct executive authority to establish large scale programs, as the role of Lieutenant Governor is primarily legislative and administrative. However, Robinson has used his position to influence policy, advocate for specific issues, and amplify conservative values, especially in the areas of education and governance. His efforts are primarily focused on the following areas: focus on education and the FAC tests, task force. One of Robinson's most significant initiatives is the FACTS, fairness and accountability in the classroom for teachers and students, task force, which he launched to investigate concern about the content being taught in North Carolina's public schools. The task force was created to address complaints from parents and educators about what they saw as inappropriate political or ideological content in classrooms. Its goals are to collect reports from parents, students, and teachers who believe schools are indoctrinating students with political or social ideologies, advocate for transparency in educational materials, and push for parental involvement in curriculum decisions. Support teachers who feel pressured to teach politically charged or controversial topics. The task force has been particularly focused on issues like critical race theory, CRT, and discussions of race, gender, and sexuality in schools. Advocacy for school choice. Robinson is a strong advocate for school choice, including charter schools, homeschooling, and voucher programs that allow public funds to be used for private education. While not a direct program that he implemented, Robinson has been a vocal supporter of policies that increase educational options for parents. He has used his platform to promote legislation that expands access to alternatives outside the traditional public school system. Board of Education role. As Lieutenant Governor, Robinson serves as a member of the North Carolina State Board of Education, where he has advocated for changes in public education, including more emphasis on traditional academic subjects like math, science, and reading. Let's focus on what he views as politically charged content in social studies and history. Transparency in the curriculum so parents can review and challenge classroom materials. Veterans and military affairs. Although no specific large scale programs have been created, Robinson has been a strong advocate for veterans and military families. He frequently speaks about his own service in the U.S. Army Reserve and advocates for policies that support veterans' healthcare education and employment opportunities. Economic and regulatory policy. Robinson has also been a vocal supporter of deregulation and lowering taxes to create a more business friendly environment in North Carolina. While he hasn't spearheaded major economic programs, his advocacy aligns with efforts to reduce governmental red tape and promote small business growth. Public safety and law enforcement support. Robinson has consistently supported law enforcement and public safety initiatives. While specific programs haven't been initiated under his authority, he has championed policies that back police and call for strong enforcement of law and order. In summary, Mark Robinson's role as Lieutenant Governor is more focused on advocacy and influencing policy than directly implementing programs. His major contributions have been through his work on the FACTS task force, his advocacy for parental rights in education, and his support of school choice. When Mark Robinson speaks about critical race theory, CRT in education, he is referring to a controversial academic framework that examines how race and racism intersect with laws, social systems, and institutions in the United States. CRT suggests that racism is not just an issue of individual prejudice, but is embedded in the legal system and other societal structures. Here's a breakdown of the key points related to critical race theory in education and how Robinson views it. What is critical race theory, CRT? Origins: CRT originated in legal studies in the late 20th century. It was developed by scholars like Derek Bell and Kimberly Crenshaw to analyze how laws and policies in the US disproportionately impacted marginalized racial groups. Core concepts: systemic racism. CRT posits that racism is not just about individual bias, but is entrenched in systems and policies that disadvantage people of color. Intersectionality. This idea, introduced by Kimberly Crenshaw, looks at how race, gender, and other identities intersect to create unique experiences of oppression. Challenging neutrality, CRT challenges the idea that laws and systems are racially neutral, suggesting that many structures that seem neutral in practice perpetuate inequality. Application in education. CRT has influenced discussions in education around topics like diversity, equity, and the historical impact of racism in the US. It encourages educators to address systemic inequities in schools and include diverse perspectives, especially those of marginalized communities. Mark Robinson's views on CRT in education. Opposition to CRT. Robinson has been a vocal critic of CRT, arguing that it is a divisive ideology. He believes it teaches students to view the world through the lens of race, fostering division instead of unity. Concerns about indoctrination. He claims that CRT, along with other social justice curricula, promotes a form of indoctrination. He has expressed concern that it portrays America as inherently racist and teaches children to feel guilty about their race, especially white students. Parental control. As part of his broader platform on parental control in education, Robinson believes that parents should be able to opt their children out of lessons influenced by CRT or similar frameworks. He argues that schools should focus on academic basics like math, science, and reading rather than teaching what he considers political agendas. Legislation against CRT. Robinson supports efforts to ban or limit CRT in North Carolina schools. He has backed legislation that would prevent teachers from introducing CRT concepts into classrooms, reflecting a broader conservative push to restrict the theory's influence in K to 12 education. Broader context, CRT has become a lightning rod in debates over education in the US. While some educators and scholars view it as a valuable tool for understanding and addressing inequality, opponents like Robinson see it as harmful and divisive. This debate often mirrors broader cultural and political divides over how race and history should be taught in schools. In summary, when Mark Robinson speaks about critical race theory, he is critiquing its influence in education, claiming that it undermines American unity and promotes a negative view of the country's history and institutions. My views on how CRT is dangerous. How I feel not allowing critical race theory CRT in schools can be dangerous for several reasons, especially regarding how history, race, and systemic inequality are discussed. Here are the main concerns about banning or restricting CRT in education: limits comprehensive understanding of history, critique. Banning CRT might result in an incomplete or sanitized version of history being taught, particularly regarding issues of racism, slavery, segregation, and the civil rights movement. Critics argue that students may not fully understand the complexities of racial history in the US, which could lead to a lack of awareness about the origins and impacts of systemic racism. Danger. Without critical discussions about race and inequality, students might be unprepared to navigate or address ongoing racial issues in society, potentially perpetuating ignorance and misunderstanding. Prevents honest conversations about race. Critique. Not allowing CRT in schools may stifle necessary conversations about race, inequality, and privilege. By avoiding these discussions, critics argue that schools miss opportunities to teach students how to engage in meaningful dialogue about race relations in America. Danger. Avoiding or downplaying these conversations could lead to students growing up without the tools to address or understand contemporary racial issues, exacerbating societal divisions and racial tension. Ignores systemic racism. Critique. CRT is rooted in the idea that racism is not just a matter of individual prejudice, but is embedded in legal systems and institutions. By banning CRT, critics argue that schools ignore the broader systemic nature of racism and how it has shaped societal structures. Danger. Without understanding systemic racism, students may be ill equipped to recognize and address inequality in areas like education, healthcare, criminal justice, and employment, potentially hindering progress toward greater racial justice and equity. Stifles critical thinking. Critique. CRT encourages students to think critically about laws, policies, and power dynamics, particularly in the context of race and class. Banning CRT may limit the development of critical thinking skills by preventing students from engaging with challenging and complex topics. Danger. If schools avoid tough conversations about race and inequality, students may be left with superficial or simplistic understandings of these issues, undermining their ability to engage thoughtfully and responsibly with diverse perspectives. Excludes marginalized voices. Critique. CRT provides a framework for including the experiences and perspectives of marginalized groups, particularly African Americans, in discussions of U.S. history and law. Not allowing CRT could lead to the exclusion of these voices, reinforcing a Eurocentric or dominant culture narrative. Danger. Marginalized communities might feel further alienated or erased from the educational narrative, and students from all backgrounds might not develop empathy or understanding for the experiences of people from different racial or socioeconomic backgrounds. Perpetuates myths of a post racial society. Critique. By not discussing systemic racism and its lasting effects, schools might reinforce the idea that America is now a post racial society where racial issues are no longer significant. Critics argue that this ignores ongoing racial disparities in areas like policing, healthcare, housing, and education. Danger. Students may develop a false sense of racial equality and fail to recognize or address the very real inequalities that persist today, making it harder to work toward a more just and equitable society. Suppresses free inquiry and diverse perspectives. Critique. Some view the ban on CRT as an attempt to suppress free inquiry and intellectual diversity in education. By limiting what can be taught, critics argue that schools are curbing academic freedom and preventing students from being exposed to a wide range of ideas and perspectives. Danger. A lack of diverse perspectives could narrow students' worldviews, prevent them from developing informed opinions, and limit their ability to engage with complex social issues in a thoughtful, informed way. Also, banning critical race theory, CRT, can undermine the argument for reparations by removing a framework that explains the historical and systemic foundations of racial inequality in the US. But I will do a deep dive into this topic on a future video. This video is about Lieutenant Governor Mark Robinson. The concern among those who oppose the banning of CRT is that it could lead to an incomplete and less critical understanding of American history, prevent necessary conversations about race and inequality, and exclude the experiences of marginalized groups. They argue that not allowing CRT in schools could result in a less informed, less empathetic, and less prepared generation when it comes to addressing ongoing social and racial issues in the US. Mark Robinson, the current Lieutenant Governor of North Carolina and a prominent figure in the 2024 governor's race, has strongly advocated for increased parental control in education. His views emphasize that parents should have a greater say in what their children are taught, particularly when it comes to issues of curriculum and social values. Here are some key points about his stance on parental control in education. One, opposition to certain curricula. Robinson has been vocal against certain teachings in schools, particularly around issues of gender identity, sexual orientation, and what he calls indoctrination related to critical race theory, CRT. He believes that parents should have the right to decide if and how their children are exposed to such topics. Two, parental rights and school transparency. Robinson advocates for more transparency in the curriculum, where parents should be informed and have the power to object to materials they find inappropriate. This includes his support for legislation that would allow parents to review classroom materials and opt their children out of lessons they disagree with. Third, school choice. Another pillar of his education platform is support for school choice, including charter schools and voucher programs. He believes that giving parents more options outside of the traditional public school system would allow them to choose environments that align with their values. Four, criticism of public schools. Robinson has often criticized the public school system, stating that it is pushing an agenda that doesn't reflect the values of many parents. He suggests that schools should focus more on traditional academics and less on what he sees as political or social indoctrination. His views reflect a broader conservative push for increased parental rights in education, often framed as a fight against the perceived overreach of government and educational institutions into family and personal values. The racial dynamics in Mark Robinson's campaign for governor of North Carolina are significant, given his political positions, his own background as an African American conservative, and the broader racial landscape of North Carolina politics. Here are some key aspects of the racial divide in his race. Robinson's appeal to white conservatives. Strong support from white evangelical and conservative voters. Mark Robinson has built a substantial base of support among white conservatives, particularly in rural areas. His outspoken positions on social issues like education, gun rights, and opposition to critical race theory resonate strongly with white evangelical voters and those who favor traditional conservative policies. Anti CRT and anti woke messaging. His critiques of critical race theory, CRT, his opposition to woke culture, and his emphasis on parental rights and education are key pillars of his platform. These stances have energized his conservative base, particularly among those who feel that liberal policies on race and gender are divisive or damaging. Tensions with African American voters, mixed reception among Black voters. While Robinson is African American, he has faced resistance from many Black voters due to his conservative views, especially his opposition to programs that many Black communities view as important, such as affirmative action or certain civil rights focused policies. His criticisms of social welfare programs and statements about systemic racism have also been at odds with the views of many African Americans. Race and representation. Robinson's presence as a prominent Black conservative is rare, and he often challenges the notion that African Americans must align with the Democratic Party. However, his positions have sparked criticism from Black Democrats and progressives who argue that his policies and rhetoric do not support the advancement of racial equity. Despite being the state's first Black lieutenant governor, he has not received widespread support from Black voters, race, and gender in his campaign. Robinson has made headlines for controversial comments about race, gender, and LGBTQ plus issues, which have drawn criticism from progressive and minority communities. Some of these remarks have contributed to a perception among minority groups that Robinson's policies and rhetoric are dismissive of their experiences and concerns. His views on gender and the LGBTQ plus community have also played a role in creating a divide, with many progressive Black and white voters feeling alienated by his stances on these issues. Demographic challenges, urban versus rural divide. North Carolina's urban areas, which are more racially diverse and tend to lean Democratic, may present a challenge for Robinson. Cities like Charlotte, Raleigh, and Durham have large African American and minority populations that tend to support more progressive candidates. Robinson's base is largely rural and suburban, where conservative white voters are more dominant. Hispanic and Asian voters. These growing demographic groups in North Carolina have tended to lean Democratic in recent elections. Robinson's campaign may face difficulties in reaching these voters, particularly if his platform is seen as divisive or exclusionary. Framing the racial debate. Focus on individual responsibility. Robinson frequently emphasizes personal responsibility and the idea that race should not be used as a lens to explain disparities in society. This message resonates with his conservative supporters, but clashes with progressive and minority groups who advocate for policies addressing systemic inequality. American dream narrative. Robinson often frames his own story, growing up in poverty, serving serving in the military, and rising to political office as an example of the opportunities available to everyone in the US, regardless of race. He often contrasts this narrative with what he describes as a victimhood mentality, which he believes is promoted by liberal policies. Potential for history making. If Robinson wins, he would become North Carolina's first Black governor. While this would be a historic milestone, the significance of his race is complicated by the fact that his policies and views often diverge sharply from those of many in the Black community. For some, his candidacy represents an important moment in diversifying conservative leadership, while for others, it highlights a deep ideological divide within the Black electorate. Mark Robinson's gubernatorial campaign presents a racial divide that is shaped by both his identity as a Black conservative and his policy positions, which often challenge mainstream Black political thought. He has significant support among white conservatives, particularly in rural areas, but faces opposition from many African Americans and other minority groups who view his policies as out of step with their concerns. His campaign reflects the broader racial and political divisions in North Carolina, where issues of race, education, and cultural values remain central to the political conversation. Mark Robinson, the Lieutenant Governor of North Carolina and a candidate for governor in 2024, has been involved in several controversies that have drawn significant attention. Many of these controversies stem from his outspoken, unapologetic approach to political discourse, particularly on issues related to race, gender, sexuality, and religion. Here are some of the key controversies surrounding him. Comments on LGBTQ plus issues. Filth remarks. In 2021, Robinson sparked a major controversy when he referred to LGBTQ plus content in public schools as filth during a speech. He said, "There's no reason anybody anywhere in America should be telling any child about transgenderism, homosexuality, any of that filth." This comment led to backlash from LGBTQ plus advocacy groups, Democrats, and even some Republicans who viewed the remarks as inflammatory and harmful. Defending his position, Robinson doubled down on his comments, saying that he was specifically referring to sexually explicit material being taught in schools, not LGBTQ plus individuals themselves. However, the controversy didn't die down as many saw his remarks as part of a broader pattern of hostility toward LGBTQ plus rights. Views on abortion, harsh rhetoric. Robinson has made several strong statements about abortion, referring to it as murder and advocating for the complete banning of the procedure, even in cases of rape or incest. In a speech, he stated that people who are pro choice love murder. Personal story and criticism. Robinson revealed in 2022 that he and his wife had an abortion early in their relationship, which added nuance to his views, but also sparked criticism. Some saw his personal story as at odds with his hardline stance, while others appreciated his openness. He has since said he regrets the decision and believes abortion should not be an option. Statements on gender and women's roles. Not designed to lead. Remarks. Robinson has made comments suggesting that men and women have inherently different roles in society, arguing that men are natural leaders. In a controversial sermon, he said, "We are called to be led by men. God sent women out when they had to do their thing, but when it was time to face down Goliath, he sent David, not Davida." These comments were criticized as sexist and perpetuating outdated gender norms. Defense of traditional gender roles. Robinson often defends traditional gender roles, emphasizing that men should be protectors and leaders of their families. Critics argue that this rhetoric is exclusionary and marginalizes women's contributions to leadership in both the family and society. Anti Semitic and anti Muslim remarks. Controversial social media posts. Robinson has faced criticism for past social media posts that have been described as anti Semitic and anti Muslim. For example, he once suggested that Hollywood promotes globalist agendas and has made derogatory comments about Muslims. These posts have been condemned by various civil rights groups, though Robinson has defended himself, stating that his critiques are political and not rooted in hatred of any specific group. Comments on climate change. Robinson has publicly dismissed the scientific consensus on climate change, referring to climate change concerns as a religion and calling it a flat out lie. His dismissive tone on the topic has drawn criticism from environmental advocates and political opponents who argue that his stance undermines efforts to address the very real threats posed by climate change. Anti vaccine and COVID 19 rhetoric. Opposition to COVID 19 measures. Robinson has been a vocal critic of COVID 19 restrictions, mask mandates, and vaccination efforts. He framed these public health measures as government overreach, arguing that they infringe on personal freedoms. His rhetoric on vaccines, particularly early in the pandemic, was seen by some as encouraging vaccine hesitancy. Skepticism of government. Robinson's broader skepticism of government involvement in healthcare and his opposition to COVID 19 protocols have resonated with a portion of conservative voters, but have also drawn sharp criticism for downplaying the severity of the pandemic. Critical race theory, CRT, and education controversies. Opposition to CRT. Robinson has been one of the most vocal opponents of critical race theory in North Carolina, arguing that it promotes division and teaches children to see America as inherently racist. He launched the FACTS task force to gather complaints from parents who believe schools are indoctrinating students with leftist ideology. His stance has drawn both support and backlash. Comments on slavery. Robinson has made controversial statements downplaying the current impacts of slavery on Black Americans, suggesting that systemic racism is no longer a significant barrier to success. This stance has alienated many in the African American community who believe in addressing the lingering effects of historical racial oppression. Religious extremism accusations. Strong Christian nationalist views. Robinson has been criticized for blending religion with politics in a way that some see as extreme. He frequently invokes his Christian faith in political speeches, often framing his policy positions as part of a divine mission. Critics argue that this alienates non Christian communities and promotes a Christian nationalist agenda. God and governance. Robinson's comments about the U.S. being a Christian nation and his belief that the government should reflect Christian values have led to concerns about the separation of church and state. His speeches often include biblical references to support his political views, which critics believe can alienate those who do not share his religious beliefs. Mark Robinson's candid and often controversial remarks on LGBTQ plus rights, abortion, gender roles, race, religion, and climate change have sparked significant debate in North Carolina and beyond. His unapologetic style resonates with his conservative base, but it has also led to backlash from progressives, moderates, and various advocacy groups. These controversies will likely play a major role in his gubernatorial race as he continues to be a polarizing figure in North Carolina politics. Overall, I don't believe Mark Robinson will win the governor's race because North Carolina has changed significantly. The state has seen an influx of people with different perspectives, and it's no longer defined by the deep rooted racist history it once had. Radical and hateful speech simply won't be tolerated or accepted like it was in the past. Yes, ignorance still exists, but I believe the activism we will see and the desire for progress will overshadow any negative rhetoric that tries to divide us. In my experience, the issues people focus on the most often reflect their own struggles. Um, so remember to vote, make your voice heard. When you do, consider what best serves you as an individual first, then your community, and finally the country as a whole. The world is changing, and by voting, you can help shape it. Be on the right side of history. In the end, these are just my thoughts and research on the topic, but I'd love to hear what you think as well. Let's keep the conversation going in the comments. Your perspective matters. Thanks for watching. And if you found this video helpful or thought provoking, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more content. See you in the next video. Stay tuned for part 3.
Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, y'all. Period. She said it.